Imagine this. It is your wedding day and you are not walking down an aisle in a white dress. You are 12 years old, your stomach twisted into knots, and a man almost 3 times your age is about to be called your husband. You have met him twice. Your father chose him for his connections, his land, his usefulness. Before the sun is fully up, your mother wakes you with shaking hands. She is not holding flowers. She is holding a spear. Not a toy, not a harmless prop, a real weapon that, if the whispers in the house are true, has already torn through human flesh. She presses the cold metal against your scalp, parting your hair strand by strand, and leans close to whisper the one rule that mattered most on her own wedding night tonight: do not resist. Within hours, you will be hauled through the streets of Rome, your feet barely touching the ground, while a crowd of strangers laughs, stares, and shouts rough jokes about your new life. You will be carried over a doorway that has been smeared with animal fat into a house that is not yours, toward a bed that has been placed on purpose in the most public part of the home. There, in a room that is more stage than sanctuary, a knot around your waist will be untied. In Roman eyes, once that knot is opened, there is no going back. Your childhood is over, your old life is over, and everyone around you will call this a blessing. This is not a horror movie. This was a respectable Roman wedding. Not an outlaw practice, not something done in secret corners, but a ritual performed in front of family, neighbors, and gods for centuries. And if you think the worst part is the age difference or the spear you are going to want to hold on, because the real nightmare is that none of this was considered a crime. It was considered normal, and normal is often the scariest word in history. Before we dive into the night itself, we need to understand the first symbol Rome put in a girl's hands, that spear. The ritual was called the hasta calibaris, the celibate spear. On paper, it sounds almost poetic. In reality, it meant that on the morning of her wedding, the first thing to touch a bride's head was not a comb, not a veil, but a weapon that symbolized blood and conquest. Her mother used the point to part her hair into 6 neat sections, then braided each one into the style worn by the Vestal Virgins, Rome's holy priestesses. It was a strange, chilling mix, an image of sacred purity, created with an instrument of war. Why a spear at all? Ancient writers like Plutarch offered polite explanations: to honor Mars, the god of war, to bless the marriage with strength, to remind everyone of Rome's victories. But they also hinted at a darker truth that Romans themselves quietly acknowledged. The spear was a thread back to the story they told about their own birth. As a people, the abduction of the Sabine women. In that legend, Roman men solved their woman shortage by inviting a neighboring tribe to a festival, then snatching the women in the middle of the celebration while their families watched helplessly. Those captured girls became their wives. That tale was not banned. It was carved in stone, painted, celebrated. Every time a bride's hair was parted with a spear, that story was whispering in the background: wives are taken, not asked. So, from the very first touch on her head, a Roman bride was being told a simple message: this marriage is not about your choice. It is about victory. It is about transfer. It is about your body and your future moving from one man's control to another's under the watchful eye of the gods. And if that feels like an exaggeration, wait until you see how the law itself described her, because the legal language was even colder than the spear. To a modern ear, marriage sounds like a partnership. To a Roman jurist, it sounded like a transfer of power. From birth, a Roman girl lived under patria potestas, the father's power. This was not some sentimental phrase. Legally, her father could decide if she married who she married, what happened to her property, and even in early periods, whether she lived or died. When she married in the traditional form called conventio in manuum, passing into the hand, she did not step into freedom. She stepped from one cage into another. The ceremony existed to move that power from father to husband as cleanly as handing over a deed. On paper, Roman law loved to talk about consent. They wrote that both bride and groom should agree to the marriage. It sounds almost modern until you picture the reality. You are 13. Your father is the legal son your whole world orbits. Saying no to his match is like saying no to gravity. You recite the traditional line Ubitu Gaius ego Gaia, where you are Gaius. I am Gaia. It sounds sweet, like a vow of unity, but underneath it is brutal. Wherever you are, I must be. Your identity will swallow mine. Your house will erase my house. Even your name becomes the template that defines me. Rome even tied this logic around the bride's body in wool. Around her waist, they bound the cingulum, a belt, knotted into the nodus herculaneus, the knot of Hercules. It was deliberately complex, almost a puzzle, and only one person was supposed to undo it, her husband on their wedding night. The symbol could not be clearer. Your body, your status, your role are all treated as sealed until one man chooses to unlock them. And if you think that knot is just decoration, wait until you see what surrounds it when they march her through the streets. As the sun slides down and the torches are lit, Rome's favorite part of the wedding begins, the procession to the groom's house. This is not two people strolling hand in hand. This is a choreographed spectacle that deliberately imitates the old story of the Sabine women. In front of both families, the groom steps forward and seizes the bride, pulling her away from her mother's arms. Roman authors say she is supposed to pretend to resist, to cry, to hesitate. Officially, this is done to calm the spirits of her childhood home, to show she is not leaving them willingly. Unofficially, it sends a very real signal. Even your fear is now part of the performance. The streets fill with people. Torchbearers turn the city into a tunnel of fire and shadow. Flute players add a shrill, almost unreal soundtrack. Boys walk ahead carrying the tools she will use as a wife spindle distaff, symbols of endless domestic work. Nuts are thrown into the crowd as a fertility symbol and as free snacks to attract even more bystanders. And then come the voices. The crowd shouts fescennine versus crude mocking chants that joke and jeer about the couple, especially about the bride and her new status. The official explanation is that coarse words drive away evil spirits. But imagine being 12 or 13 years old, walking between walls of shouting adults who are turning your anxiety into a party game. By the time the procession reaches the groom's door, the bride has already been taught half a dozen times that her terror is entertainment, that her reluctance is expected, and that everyone around her accepts what is being arranged over her head. And the rituals are not done yet. She still has to be carried into the house, stood in front of the family bed and stripped of the last symbols of her old life while the house quietly watches. At the doorway of her new home, the bride is not allowed to simply walk in. Roman tradition says that if she trips over the threshold, it is a disaster, a bad omen that might curse the entire marriage. The solution is to remove her feet from the equation. The groom or his attendants lift her and carry her over the threshold. Today we turn this into a romantic gesture in movies, but in its original form it had a sharper edge. It said, you do not enter this house by your own step. You enter because you are brought in. You cross this line as carried property, not as an equal partner. Inside, she does not find a quiet bedroom tucked away in the back. At the center of the house is the atrium, the main hall where clients gather each morning, where business deals are made, where ancestors stare down from their painted masks on the walls. And in that room, intentionally visible, stands the lectus genialis, the marriage bed. Draped in rich fabrics placed where guests can see it, it is less a place of rest than a monument. It broadcasts one message: this is the bed that proves this family is fertile, legitimate, respectable. It is a symbol first, furniture second. Here in this half-public stage, another woman takes over for a moment, the pronuba. She must be a univira married only once the ideal wife the bride is supposed to copy. The pronuba leads the girl to the bed, guides her through formal gestures, whispers advice. Officially, she is there to comfort. But under the surface, she is there to make sure the script continues smoothly, so there is no pause, no disruption, no challenge to what is expected. And as the lamps flicker and the noise from the street dies down, one last piece of the costume waits to be removed. Now, the house is mostly quiet. The crowd is outside, the worst of the shouting has faded into drunken laughter in the distance. Somewhere nearby, a few relatives and servants still move around close enough to hear if voices are raised. In the atrium, the bride stands beside the marriage bed, the wool belt still tied around her waist in the nod of Hercules. This is the moment Romans like to describe as playful. Ancient writers talk about how the husband's skill in untying the knot is a sign of future success. If he unravels it quickly, they say the marriage will be smooth and prosperous. If he struggles, that is a bad omen. Listen to that image without the pretty words. A grown man, often in his late 20s or 30s, begins to work at a knot around the waist of a girl, barely into her teens, while the house waits and listens beyond thin walls. The knot is the line between her as protected and her as claimed. There's only one person allowed to cross that line. Roman law gives him that right. Tradition blesses it. Religion wraps it in incense and myth. The bride has no recognized legal power to say no. The idea that she could refuse, that she could withdraw consent at this point simply does not exist in the legal world she has been born into. Romans called what came next consummation, the final step that turned a betrothal into a completed marriage and opened the path to heirs. Modern historians are more blunt when they describe the power imbalance at work here. Strip away the Latin and the ceremony, and you are left with a very stark picture, a child whose choices have been swallowed by the decisions of older men, being taught in the clearest possible way that her role is obligation. And as the night ends and the light returns, even that private ordeal is not entirely her own. Mourning does not bring relief. It brings inspection. In many Roman households, the linen from the marriage bed is examined, sometimes even displayed, to prove that the bride had been untouched before and that the marriage has been completed now. What happened in the dark becomes evidence for family honor in the daylight. If the signs people expect are there, they smile, congratulate, joke. If they are not, there can be whispers, blame, even legal consequences. Remember, the whole value of her purity is that any child she bears will be unquestionably credited to her husband. In a system obsessed with legitimate heirs, her body has become quality control. You might be tempted to think, well, that was Rome. We know better now. But the way Rome built and justified these rituals did not stay locked in the past. Later, Christian writers attacked pagan wedding customs, describing some alleged practices in extreme, shocking terms, gods with obscene statues, brides forced into degrading rites in front of idols. Many of those accusations are exaggerated or impossible to verify, and serious historians treat them carefully. But the very fact that such stories were believable says something important. Roman marriage rituals were already so saturated with control and humiliation that adding one more disturbing detail sounded plausible. Over time, as Christianity spread, and then as later Europeans looked back at Rome as a golden age, a quiet editing process took place. New ceremonies replaced old ones. Painful details were skipped in retellings. Renaissance artists painted marble bodies and noble senators, not 12-year-old brides, marched through streets to coarse songs. We kept the columns and the Latin mottos. We left the girl with the spear in the shadows. To see the full picture again, we have to drag her back into the center and admit how much of our idea of tradition was built on her silence. When people today praise the glory of Rome, they usually mean aqueducts, law codes, and arches that still stand after 2,000 years. They talk about Roman discipline, Roman order, Roman genius. All of that is real. But there is another inheritance wrapped up in that admiration, a long history of turning women's lives and bodies into tools for someone else's power. The spear in the hair, the staged abduction, the mocking songs, the public bed, the knot that only one man may untie, none of that was a glitch in the system. It was the system. It trained each new bride to understand without a single written lecture that her will did not set the rules. Tradition did. Law did. Men did. History is not just a highlight reel of great buildings and famous battles. It is also a record of how control is disguised. In Rome, control wore the mask of family honor, religious duty, and the way things have always been done. No guard with a sword needed to stand over the marriage bed. The work had already been done by the stories told to children, the rituals drilled into them, the jokes shouted by the crowd. And when Christianity arrived and later Europe copied Rome's grandeur, many of those control patterns quietly came along for the ride, from the idea that a father gives away a bride to the long, ugly delay in recognizing that forcing intimacy inside marriage can be a crime. So the next time you see a movie set in classical Rome marble temples, armored generals, clever senators trading sharp lines, try to picture another scene playing out at the same time. Somewhere behind those walls, a 12 or 13-year-old girl is having her hair parted, with a weapon being pulled from her mother's arms, carried across a doorway she did not choose, and stood beside a bed placed in the most public room of the house. That, too, is Rome. And if this journey into the parts of Roman life that polite history likes to skip made you see those marble statues a little differently, hit subscribe, and stay with us. There are many more stories powerful civilizations tried to bury, and we are not finished digging them up.